friends. Lori Ashcraft here. I'm your host for VIVA La Evolution, which is a training and consulting branch of Recovery and Resilience Solutions, which is a consulting and training branch of Crestwood Behavioral Health. And today, I'm just very happy to share a good friend of mine's personal recovery story. That would be Gloriana Hunter. And Gloriana and I have known each other, maybe for over 20 years. We started working together when I met her as a person who was just starting another part of her recovery. And I had the privilege of journeying with her as she moved on into being a trainer and facilitator and many other things of peer training. So it was quite a journey and an amazing experience to accompany her a little bit of her way. I want to give you some heads up about what to listen for in her story. First of all, the whole idea, and we've all said this forever, but let me just say it again, recovery is not a straight line. It's an up and down process. And Gloriana's story really illustrates how those ups and downs can happen and how you learn to pull out each time and pull yourself back up. Maybe at the end I'll tell you a little bit about the blog that accompanies this. The blog talks about what happens internally when we go through that pulling ourselves back up again. And you'll remember over the last few times when we've heard stories of recovery that often it's, someone notices us. They see us struggling, they notice us, they see our potential, and they remind us of who we are. And they focus on our strengths, they give us hope until we can hold our own hope, and they stay with us, and then we pull out, and then we need opportunities to contribute and pay back. So you'll hear that in Gloriana's story. That's kind of a common theme. But what I want to do at the end today is talk about what happens internally during that process. So again, listen for Gloriana's ups and downs. Let's see, I'm going to check my notes here. Listen for transition points, because as I've pointed out before, anytime we go through a transition, we're vulnerable. Whether it's just a transition from morning to afternoon, there's a little place in there that we're kind of vulnerable. Or afternoon to evening, again, vulnerabilities, especially if you're dealing with addictions. So pay attention to transitions. Pay attention to the role that stress plays in Gloriana's story. Very powerful. We don't talk enough about stress, and we should, but Gloriana really shines the light on it in this story. And then the whole focus on community and how community really helps sustain recovery. And then she finally ends on talking a little bit about what we talked about last time, which is connecting instead of performing. So you'll hear all those things in her story, plus a whole bunch more, because it's a wonderful, heart-rending story of one person's ability to continue and to thrive against sometimes great odds. So here we go, my friend Gloriana. Hello, and thanks for joining us again. Today, we have the pleasure of talking to someone I have known and admired for a long time, Miss Gloriana. And gosh, we met maybe 10, 15 years ago?
2006.
Oh, well, that's longer than I thought. Thank you so much, Gloriana, for being willing to share your story of recovery and strength and hope with us.
Yeah.
I know it wasn't always that way, was it? Strength and hope.
No. was more of a crash and burn most of the time. Yeah, I was always like a very happy child, extremely happy, the kind who would sing at the top of the lungs, climb trees,
I can see that in you.
whatever I wanted to do. But there was a traumatic incident that happened when I was 9. And suddenly, well, not suddenly, but at that point, a lot of that happiness got muted. And there was a lot more anger, and also I began to hide things from my parents. And by hiding, I didn't tell them the trauma happened.
Okay.
Never mentioned a word of it. I didn't want to embarrass them.
Right.
So that pattern of thinking of just being quiet about what was really hurting inside started then. And that just kept going. So that was a lot of how I grew up, was with that happy place and this very painful silent place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did they coexist?
Oh yes, oh yes.
Okay.
Still had a lot of the fun. People saw me as like the life of the party, the class clown, the person who could always get a laugh, the person who would stand up on stage and talk without being nervous. All this was part of me, but then there was the silent part that I'd like to believe no one saw, but I think they did. I think they could see the struggle at times, but I never spoke it. And that was, as I found out years later, a lot to my detriment. And my healing might have happened a lot differently if I had learned to just speak the pain and talk about things that were happening that weren't always funny. Yeah.
Well, let's see, I remember you have quite an interesting educational background.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Why don't you share a little bit of that with us, just to kind of create a context for the rest of the story?
Well, through the struggles that I had as a child going into teenage years, part of it was scholastic. I knew what to do, I knew how to do it, and still I didn't do it. And by the middle of 10th grade, my GPA was 0.63, that's a D minus. And I decided that I was better off leaving high school than anything else. So I dropped out, dropped out of high school. Took the exam, got what I needed to so I could work.
The GED.
Yeah, it was actually the California High School Proficiency Exam.
Okay.
So in any other state, apparently I'm still a high school dropout.
Okay.
In California, I'm okay.
You're legal in California. Okay.
And then I started flipping burgers, working at a 5 and dime. So it was just like nowheresville. My father gave me an offer. Remember I said no one saw the pain in me?
Yes.
My father gave me an offer that I could continue to work and pay rent or go back to school and not pay rent. I took him up on that, and I'm so thankful he did that. At the time, I'm not sure I was thankful,
But you didn't want to pay rent.
I didn't want to. I wasn't making a lot at a 5 and dime and flipping burgers, right? So.
Well, I had my stint flipping burgers. I don't know if I had a. Yes, I worked at the National Dollar Store for a while, so I know we did not make much money.
No, it was very much a minimum wage. I would, the 5 and dime I worked at was right next to Tower Records, so I would take every paycheck and go buy.
Of course.
Much rather buy records than pay rent. So
right.
That's how we solved that one. So I went to school, and I started at Saddleback Community College in Mission Viejo. And it was scary because I had so much blown my high school. So much blown high school. And the first semester I was on the dean's list.
Oh.
And I think it was the age, maybe, and a different viewpoint at that time, a different place of being in my world. And that gave me the knowledge that I did have the skill in school. I just was in such a frustrated place. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to apply it. So I was able to do that right away when I got into college.
Yeah.
And I didn't really miss a beat because I had dropped out at 16. I was 18 when I went.
Okay.
So I was right along the same age as
Yeah.
everyone else.
You just had 2 years of research.
Yes, research, flipping burgers. Knowing that's not what I wanted to do, I guess.
Right.
So I just went on. I finished my associate's degree. And it was just in general liberal arts, not knowing what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But then I kind of got a feeling that I wanted to do something exciting. And I went into archaeology.
That was exciting.
It was exciting.
Okay.
So I ended up with a bachelor's degree actually in religious education. And I did it through studying archaeology. And I got a chance to go places and see things in the Middle East that not a lot of people get to see. Did digs there, studied there. It was fascinating time
I
of my
forgot about
life.
that part of you.
Yeah, so that was just a brilliant time. That was also the summer that I spent traveling was also probably one of my more significant crash and burns.
Well, why am I remembering something about ocean studies? Am I just...
I lived on a boat in Channel Island Harbor, but no, I didn't do ocean studies.
I somehow...
Yeah.
I guess it was archaeology, and somehow I went to the ocean with that.
Oh,
Sorry.
I like the ocean. Could have studied that too. No, it was archaeology.
Okay.
It was in the desert mostly.
Okay.
So that's. But it was also the summer where I think I had one of the beginnings of a upheaval emotionally that I couldn't manage.
And what do you think was behind all that?
The travel, perhaps. The moving about from location to location, even the excitement. Because one thing I've learned over the years is that stress can come from even good things.
You know, the word stress was really coming up strong for me. But just kind of weak reference points, like traveling around.
Right, and while it was fascinating, there was a lot of stress, different types of stress, making friends in new areas, eating different foods, constantly on the move, the hard work of archaeology. It is physically demanding. Drinking a little more than I probably should have during that time, and running to bomb shelters because of where we were located.
Well, there's a little stress thing going on.
There was a few opportunities for that to happen as well. So it was just a time of transition, and I think managing stress has been something I've learned to do and not something that came naturally.
So what was the crash about? What happened
there? Well, it really didn't hit till I got back in a tremendous way. It was between my junior and senior year, and I only had one semester left of my senior year. I didn't have to do the full year. That particular semester, when I got back from my trip, I had marvelous grades up until then. That last semester, my grades plummeted to C's and D's again. And it didn't look like high school situation, but I just couldn't get myself going. Still graduated with honors, so I must have been really well loading it up. But still, when I left college, it was kind of like a wah-wah. And what did I do? Because of that, I went back to flipping burgers with a 4-year degree in brilliant archaeology. So that was kind of a big letdown, and I think at that point I disappointed myself, and I had this huge feeling of disappointment. And I just stayed there for a while. Then it was kind of cool. I started working with computers, and I'm old enough where, with my 4-year degree, they did not have computers in my college. That's how old. Yes, I've got a little gray hair going on. So it wasn't until after I got out and I left flipping hamburgers and started working for a company. And there was a lot of computer work with some of the old systems, big cassettes and stuff like that. And I got really interested in it. And I found I had a knack for it. More than just pulling in the cassettes and pulling them out, but actually in the programming and working in the systems and trying to figure out databases. So I started a career in IT at that point. And good money, a lot of puzzles, a lot of thinking went into it. And I was able to make really strong advances there, to the point where I decided to do my master's of business administration in IT, which I did. So that was one of these big strides, again, academically, in spite of the struggles I had academically prior to that. Yeah.
So that brings us to, let's see. So you had finished your IT degree, I think, when I first met you.
Yes. Yes, I have.
So for me to meet you must have meant there was another crash.
Oh my goodness, was there another crash? This one involved Fresno, California. And honestly, in my story, I have not talked about that. And had to go through some therapy to be able to talk about it. It was, I had started a business and worked at Fresno State and was doing both, and started to burn the candles at both ends and ended up with a lot of sleep deprivation. And it went on for months. And I let it go on for months. With that came a physical and mental health crash and burn, as I call it. And this was tremendously huge. It affected a lot of people. I hurt a lot of people. The Fresno police actually came and said, we don't want to deal with you, but we will if we have to. Will you go home to Ventura County? And I opted for that. So I went back home to where my mom was. But it, I laugh now, but I was devastated by some of my actions and my behaviors, which were so out of character for me. But I do believe sleep deprivation and stress create sometimes scenarios where we're just not ourselves.
Right.
And that was that period of time for me.
So you're back in Ventura County then.
Yeah. And I sat.
How did you get to Arizona? Because I met you in Arizona.
I sat in Ventura County and did what I call watch the walls breathe. I was so stunned and hurt that there was nothing that was interesting or hopeful. My sister and my brother had moved to Arizona. Now, to this day, I can't tell you why I decided to move to Arizona. I don't know any dialogues that happened around that. I was not well. But I upheaved and shot out there to Phoenix, Arizona. And because I wasn't well, I just brought my unwellness with me. And that's problematic. Once again, by the way, no one knew. At least I hadn't said it. I mean, I think Fresno police knew, and I know other people did know, but I never spoke what was going on. So my secrets, what I thought were my secrets, I packed them and took them to Phoenix. And like I said, did real well, got a really solid job, a big, good paying job, had a nice car. It had outwardly everything. And inwardly started to want to feel like I wanted to die every minute of every day. And started making plans for that action. So no matter what it looked like on the outside, nothing was right on the inside. And the pain was getting too much.
I suspected by this point it was an accumulation of pain, since you'd never spoken of it.
Yeah.
So you might have just reached a tipping point too.
Yeah. Oh, I 100% agree with that. Yeah. And there was a day where I had, with the company I worked for, I'd flown up to Denver, made a huge sale. Fortune 500 company bought our product, and we were a small company. So a lot of success, and I was the hero of the story. Yay, Gloriana. Came back from the airport, celebrated with my team, got in my car to drive home. An hour commute. By the end of that hour, I had decided tonight was the night, and that it was going to be over. But one small thought occurred to me that had never occurred to me before, and that was, this is not a normal response to life. Things could be so strong and great, and an hour later, so devastating. Something needed to happen. And I was, at that point, on the verge of acting. And it was the first time I thought, I can put the brakes on this. And I called crisis. It was the first time I'd ever openly expressed
Really?
that I was in a crash and burn
Breakthrough
situation.
moments come at the most unanticipated times sometimes.
Yeah, and I don't know why at that moment. Except for maybe I was really afraid. I think in hindsight I could say that. At the time I would never admit it.
I bet so, I bet,
Yeah.
So what happened then? They came and got you, you went there?
A social worker showed up and a peer support specialist showed up.
Really?
Yes. The social worker took notes. I don't even remember their face. I remember looking at the peer support specialist while he talked to me about safety and how I was going to work through this. They did not take me in. They did, after a good conversation, and it was a long conversation, they felt that I would be okay if I had a follow-up appointment the next day. And it was fine. I was at that point able to hang on one more day, if you will. Right. And I showed up for an appointment at a clinic. At that point, I quit my job with that bonus from that big sale on the table, all the salary, all the perks, and I just stopped because I knew I couldn't do both anymore. I needed to invest in getting well. And that's what I did. I started investing in getting well.
Well, then I remember you came into our programs for some help. I don't know how you got there.
I walked into a clinic, and if you remember, you and Jean had placed some of your peer support team into clinics. Well, I walked into this clinic, and the first person I meet is someone who says, hey, if you want to talk, I can just meet with you. And his name was Keith. And so I spent some time with Keith talking. He was one of your staff, one of your peer supports that had been there. I had no idea other than he was just a really nice guy, really friendly. And I could kind of talk about some of this stuff more openly. And then he said, you should go to RAP. And a woman named Amy taught the RAP class. Again, one of the employees that you had put into a clinic. So I sat with Amy, I did RAP. I remember I was real frustrated with RAP though, mostly because I was so irritated with everyone else around me. But it wasn't a bad thing, it was a growing thing. And I questioned, why am I so angry at these people? And am I willing to grow through that? And Amy helped me with some one-on-one time to be able to do that. So there I am meeting employees of yours that you had strategically placed there just for me.
I'm so glad I did that.
And then I met one more person who wasn't employed, but you know her very well, Kathy Basher.
Oh my gosh,
And when I met her, it went from my life is over and I can no longer work to I can work and I can have a career again. I don't know what it'll look like, but she had been able to do that, so why not me?
Yeah, she has
So
an
again,
amazing recovery story.
absolutely. So again, peer support of someone who said, I've had my own life tragedy, my own crash and burns, and now I'm in a position of career and knowledge, and people are respecting and honoring this knowledge. And I thought, I could do that too. I could do that. Yeah.
I remember we just realized the power of that when we first started doing peer training, the power of, if she can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that vision, that role model of seeing it live, in vivo, and going, I can do that.
Right. And that's, you know, again, I wasn't supposed to be in the peer support training that you were running. It's really kind of a fun story. Mike Sieb, who's also on our team, was the facilitator. And the Voc Rehab at the clinic I went to asked me if I would assist someone who was blind by helping him do his homework and read to him for, you know, out of class and kind of give him that support. I said, sure, it was a little bit of cash, and I can do that. And I showed up the first day, and we shared a little bit about who we were, and so I did say I was, you know, assisting him, but I said, and I'm coming from the clinic too, and, you know, didn't share a lot, but that's where I went with it. And so after class, Mike Sieb came up and said, hey, you know, if you want, why don't you join the class as, you know, as a student.
A trainee.
Exactly. And also help this gentleman.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? And I thought, well, twice the homework, why not? But I did.
Yeah.
And everything changed. It was just like a whole healing started to happen at that moment.
I would say you started realizing that all that pain could be turned into a gift. That wound could be the source of you healing other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just really saw that.
It starts to make sense of all the bad things. It's like, oh, I can use that. It wasn't wasted.
Yeah. I don't know if it makes all the bad things worth it. Some people go there. I'm still not there.
Well, yeah, you don't have to. But it's just, it's maybe not worth it, but I can use it.
Yes.
It wasn't
it
a waste.
It happened anyway. You're not going to change it.
Right. You might as well.
Can it make a difference in your life?
Yes.
And someone else's life?
Yes.
And there's actually something Steve Jobs said at one point. He says, I want to make a dent in the universe.
Yes.
And while he had a completely different idea of what that dent looked like, I started to take that as a mantra.
Oh, that's great.
I want to make a dent in the universe.
Move the needle a little bit.
Yeah. And what it comes down to is it's one-on-one. Even in a classroom when I have maybe 20 students, it's one-on-one.
It's relationship. It just comes back over and over to that. Yeah. So you went from sneaking into peer support training, thanks to Mike Sieb, taking the training, and then moving from being a student in the class to a facilitator, teaching. What did you teach, rap, or what did you do?
No, actually, I did the one-on-one out in the community.
Okay.
Part-time, so I was a part-time employee.
Okay.
And I just drove my car around and met people in the community and talked with them and supported them and really found ways to make real big impact in helping people find their own empowerment. And I think some of this had to do with how I empowered myself to get back to school and do all the things I had done in my life career-wise, and also knowing what a crash and burn feels like. Kind of a self-starter myself, right?
Yeah.
So I knew not to butt in and be the empower.
Fix things.
But rather, here's ways you can find your power, and let's work together on that. So I really felt I was doing an awesome job at that.
So what would happen is you would go into your part-time job and someone would give you a list of your assignments for the day.
Yeah,
And
there
in your
was-
case, it was in the community.
Right, and I had, because I was part-time, I generally saw 3 people over the course of a day or a few days. There was always like
Yeah.
little buckets of 3 people. I hate to say buckets. little 3 people on a roster that I was committed to making appointments with. And all of them I loved, and it was wonderful, and the growth that they were going through.
That's so healing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is healing.
But I only did that for a little bit of time because Mike Zeeb needed me out of there, which was fine,
Yeah.
and into being an assistant for the class of peer
Oh, I
employment.
remember that.
Yes, I became Mike Zeeb's assistant
Yes.
in the class and helping, just being with students, again, helping them study if they had maybe some learning difficulty of some sort. I could be a tutor in a sense, or just a cheerleader.
Whatever it took.
Whatever it took. And there was one particular student I remember who would just have spur of the moment several times a day go through panic attacks. And this, I think, was one of my bigger learning experiences of how to be with people without needing to do much of anything. And we set it up where if that started to happen with her, she'd just tap me on the shoulder. We'd both go outside, and we sat like on a 3rd story. There was a tree that always had birds in it. And we would just sit on the ground in silence, watch the trees, and breathe. And after doing that a few times, it wasn't me, she got quicker and quicker of being able to catch that breath again and be able to re-enter the classroom. By the end of all this time, she was able to help herself through that and became employed.
Amazing.
And I saw just this transformation that I had this much to do with other than being present.
Yes.
That was it, just being present. And I think that was one of the biggest educations in peer support I had.
That intentional presence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then I'm kind of remembering that we needed another trainer in peer support.
Yes.
And-
Now, I was still part-time,
Okay.
but I approached Mike and I said, I'm ready. I'm ready for full-time work, which I had said for a long time, right?
Yeah.
But I knew I was ready, and if that involved stress, I don't know. I was a little fearful of doing that, but I was ready, and I knew I was ready, and Mike knew I was ready.
Yeah.
So he actually offered me an employment coordinator position first.
Oh, okay.
And I helped people who were mostly justice involved try and find jobs that were suitable for them and gave them that advantage. So that was really the first time I worked with people who were justice involved. And my heart went out to them because I saw just how difficult it was.
Oh, it is.
And beautiful people
Yes.
who really wanted to get back on their feet, make a difference, build a life, and could not get one of the primary things we all find that's healing and important, work.
Yes.
Not even the simplest work.
Yes.
That was a big learning experience for me.
Well, then you became a regular facilitator full time, I remember.
I did, and it came on the heels of one of the instructors had a health issue, and it was quite sudden, and no one was there to teach the class. Well, I had been an assistant in the class for a long time at that point, so I just stood up and taught. So I just stood up and taught.
Yeah.
I just started at that point.
And I remember watching you in the early days, and you were doing everything perfectly, but you weren't there.
Lori, there was a point where you and I had this conversation, and you said, you're not putting you into it.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you mean? And you said, as soon as I see it, I'll point it out.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So you didn't point out where I wasn't putting myself in. One day I was standing at the copier with a work associate, and we were singing, and I was whistling, and I was dancing while making copies. And you said, "That's it.
Okay.
That's who you need
That's
to
what's
be.
missing."
You are not that person in the class." And I took the ball and ran with it.
Yeah.
I gotta say,
Yeah.
I dance in front of classes now.
I'm so
There's nothing stopping me from being as silly as I possibly can be while still getting the educational
Yes,
part out
yes.
and the message out.
Yes.
So,
I was thinking they're going to know what this material is, but they aren't going to know who Gloriana is.
yeah.
And I think you were still in that trying to be safe zone. A little bit of fear.
Professional, you
Oh,
know.
yeah, okay.
There was so many things I had brought with before peer support.
Yeah.
Came in with that edge of professionalism, the, you know, whatever it is that was
Yeah.
going on then.
Yeah.
But when you invited me to play,
Yeah.
I do believe my students had better retention.
Oh, sure.
I do believe they were more engaged. They laughed as well and found ways to have fun in class that didn't interrupt the flow at all.
Right.
But because I transformed, they were allowed to
You
transform.
opened a place for them
Yes.
to come.
Yeah. And I know now that my classes are some of the funnest classes. I'm not talking about just with Crestwood or anything else, but even when I watch any other class being operated on any other topic,
Yeah.
I know what I bring to the table now.
Yeah.
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 So,
Well, and now, full circle, here you are at Crestwood,
yes.
writing curriculum, teaching classes.
Yeah.
What's that like to be here?
I was so ready for this breath of fresh air. I had been a consultant for a while, quite a few years, and did everything from population health analysis, which
I remember when you were doing that.
which had to do with IT stuff again, you know, and that was wonderful and not at the same time. It was, you know, and then just developing trainings for companies, jumping in and training for companies. Worked with the state of Arizona for a while, developed their advanced peer support program to where it's now a nonprofit, and I was able to hand off something that they could take and make a nonprofit out of. I didn't want to do that part, but I handed it off, and it's thriving now, so
Great.
that's exciting.
Yeah.
But I was kind of burnt out of that consultant work, always chasing my next client and then wondering why they're not paying me. That was part of it. It's like, okay. Yeah, so I was ready
Yeah.
and talked with my partner about it and decided that as I enter this age that I'm in right now, that putting the last, I don't want to say few years because it's still enough years, but putting this energy into what's happening in California, what's happening in the national perspective, even internationally, taking all the knowledge that I now have after, oh my goodness, 17, 18 years, and being able to shift and affect change that way.
Yeah.
And it was time, and I was ready. And
This is such a great place to contribute
yeah,
and learn at the same time. So
absolutely. I
So
know
glad
shifts
you're
are
here.
happening in the company. I know shifts are happening in the state.
Yeah.
And just to be able to come back to the state where I came from and be able to be partner
Yes.
to work on these changes
Yeah.
and maybe go back to Fresno without shame. which I'm going to be doing.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so as long as the police don't tell me to go back to Ventura, we're okay.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Very inspiring. Just, it's just a tribute to the human spirit, isn't it?
It really is.
How it can keep bouncing back and learning and moving ahead. So,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you for asking, Lori. So good to spend time with you
You
again.
too. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there you have it. I told you you would love this story, and you'll love Gloriana. Not as much as I love her, but you'll still love her. Well, you might love her as much. I don't know. Who am I to say? Anyway, I want to just go over something that's in the blog. I hope you'll read the blog, because the blog is much more coherent than me talking. I tend to get off track and wander around, as you know by now. So anyway, in the blog, I talk about this process that goes on internally. And when we go through a change, which we're going to, in this context, call recovery. And you heard it in Gloriana's story. It might not have smacked you in the face because she doesn't bring it forward strongly, but it's there, and it's this internal process. And the way it works is we want to change. We want to make different choices. And the choice might be to have hope instead of feel hopeless. So we come up to that point, and habitually we want to go down the hopeless trail because it's well trodden and we know it. We know the pain of it, but it's familiar. But there's this little space before we go down there. And it's a space where we have an opportunity to make a different decision. We can go down the road we've always gone down, or we can go down another road. Hopeless or hopeful. And it sometimes doesn't feel like a choice. It's almost pre-conscious. We barely get it. But if we can bring it to consciousness just enough to stay in that space a minute and choose a new route, that's the beginning of how we change. Now, we might have to do that several times before it sticks, but that's the internal process of change. And it's not just about recovery. It's about any old human being changing any old thing. It's that space where we make a different decision. So, again, Gloriana doesn't highlight that, but you probably could hear it throughout. And you can, if you'd please read the blog, it does a really good job of describing it. Bill Anthony and I actually wrote this piece several years ago, and it's never gone out of style for some reason. And I think it'll give you a really much better picture than what I'm doing right now about what we're talking about. So that's it for now. It's been lovely spending a little time with you again. Was so good to hear Gloriana's story too. I just love it that we all recover, and we're constantly recovering. So thanks again for joining us, and see you next time. Bye for now.